It has been 8 weeks since I started this podcast, The Momentum Experiment. And from that first episode, I explained that the podcast itself is experimental, primarily in that I want to focus on being more consistent creating content. And to do that, I decided to record this podcast live every week on Wednesdays, and then I would upload them on Thursdays. And today I decided to take a break. Seeing that it was my 8th episode, I want to check back and share how it's really going. And when I say really going, I mean I'm going to talk about numbers and actually share them. And what is working, what is not working, what am I focused on next, and what am I learning from this? Because I am learning a lot. And podcasting is no joke. It takes a lot of work. So what are some of the things I am thinking about? And one of the things, just as sort of a recap, I already kind of mentioned the live on Wednesdays and recording, but essentially the way that I do this is prep in advance. I schedule the stream at the start of the week, go live on Wednesdays where I will chat usually before and after the podcast episode portion, which, spoiler, it's one of my favorite parts of the week. And then after that, I will just cut out that middle, and then that goes out as audio early Thursday morning, and then on YouTube a little bit later around 11 o'clock Eastern is how I release it. So now that you know that, I want to share the numbers. I'll be honest, they're humbling, but it is beginning. I am beginning. So from audio standpoint, since starting, I've had 183 downloads. However, on YouTube, the number is a bit higher. I've got over 1,600 views on my channel over the last 8 weeks, primarily and actually almost exclusively podcast episodes. And together, we put that, it's around 1,800 views/listens. Now, of course, I cannot know for sure if someone listens to the full thing, watches the full thing, but those are the numbers I'm going on right now. Now, two thoughts come up when I see these numbers. One is that my logical brain says, hey, you're just getting started. These are respectable numbers. People are checking out the episodes. And then there's the second thought, which is my emotional part of the brain that says, oh man, I am used to different kinds of numbers when it comes to creating content. For example, if I look at the last 28 days on my tutorial channel, I had around 22,000 views, and I haven't put out a new video in almost a year. And then I have a gray hair channel that I haven't put out content to that channel since I finished growing out my gray hair. So those have been a few years. And even that channel had 2.2 thousand views. So that being said, I know how this works. It is the long game, and a lot of the views that I'm getting are because I put out a bunch of content that people are now finding because they're still looking for that content. When it comes to this podcast, this is brand new. I need to get the traction. I need to keep showing up. And I know that. It is, though, I'm just being honest, that when you are used to putting in this time, seeing it come out on the other side and maybe just getting used to different numbers can be challenging. So I am in this constant sort of back and forth between my logical brain saying, yes, this is what you expected, and also, oh, this is not what I'm used to. And that's just me being completely honest about what I experience when I look at these numbers. Now, the other thing that I notice when I look at the numbers is that I am not seeing the pattern I do want to see, which is that I want to see traction where it's going up. And I'm not seeing that right now. And in fact, that is something that I learned from the very early days when I started out on YouTube, is I wasn't seeing traction and I knew something had to change. And so I did. And unlike last time where I actually just kind of pivoted my focus, this time I still want to stick with the type of content I am creating, which is focused on how you can use the momentum formula, the principles, the ideas and concepts behind it, understanding what this is all about and how it practically works. But I want to do it in a way that resonates and that people want to come back for and keep watching and then share. And so this is where I think there's just a lot of mindset work. And I actually, as I was reflecting and preparing for today's episode, thinking about the numbers, thinking about my reaction to those numbers, it made me think of how there are a lot of people I've talked to who have done something successfully in the past, and they have a new idea that they are interested in pursuing, but they hold themselves back from pursuing it, like starting a new channel or starting a new area of focus. Maybe it's not a specific channel. And they have proven that they're able to do this in the past, but they drag their heels, they hold themselves back, they delay and delay and delay. And they'll say to themselves, this is so silly. I know how to do this. Why am I not doing it? And this is an example of where there are stakes, there are concerns. What if I can't repeat what I've done before? What if I do this and it doesn't work and people see that it doesn't work? And so I know that one of the reasons that a lot of people will delay doing something that they've done before and that has worked is because they have fears of, well, what if this doesn't turn out the way that I expect? Now, luckily for me, I've done a lot of this work and I'm still trying to do this work to say, okay, what is the worst that can happen? Okay, the worst is that nobody shows up and nobody finds any value in anything I'm doing. And then the second question is, okay, now even if something bad happens, might I still be okay? And so when I take that into account of what am I afraid will happen, and also if that bad thing happens, will I still be okay? Constantly reminding myself of that has been really helpful. And it's one of the reasons I want to be very open about my numbers and how I'm feeling 8 weeks going into this, is because this is one of those things that it's not necessarily what I would have chosen. I would have chosen an experience where I would continue to have traction, and that's not necessarily the trend that I'm seeing. But I don't regret doing this, and I'm going to continue to put more work into this. And when it comes to that mindset, I think the reason that I feel okay about this is because I truly went into this with an experimentation mindset of saying, I am going in curious, I'm going to try things, and I'm going to see what works and what doesn't. And now that I have a couple months of data that I can look at, I am starting to get some information, maybe about what's working and what's not working. And first, let's actually take a look at what I think is going well. And so for me, what is going well is consistency. And that was the whole goal, is that I am showing up week after week and creating regular content. And I am talking about subjects that deeply fascinate me and that hopefully give perspectives. And I have heard from individuals who have said, oh, that's really good insight. I hadn't thought of that. And they are benefiting from the content that they are hearing. And so from that angle, things are going well. The other piece is that I really do enjoy every interaction I have during the Wednesday live, whether there's a larger group or a smaller group. I truly feel gratitude each week when someone says hi in the chat or just engages. That is something that when I ask those questions, what would it look like if it were fun? It's this idea that I am showing up and there's someone else who is there while I'm recording this. That is really, how do I describe this? It's a highlight of my week, and it makes this more enjoyable to create. Now, the other thing that I think is going well is that I have made a commitment to make this podcast even when I am not comfortable in my studio. At home, I have all of the gear, all of the setup. I feel much more comfortable. I'm not worried about things going wrong. Whereas when I'm on the road, it's a little bit of freewheeling. You never know what's going to go wrong. I am not always sure about internet connection, about my camera, my microphone, all of that. And just saying, you know what, I'm going to try and do this scrappy anyway. Now, it's partly to just show that it does not need to be complicated. This is both showing myself, but also showing others that it is possible to continue making content if you've kind of made that commitment. And so that part feels really good to me. I also think that given my current capacity, so all of the commitments, the things that I have going on in both my professional and personal life, I think that I am doing a good job of showing up week after week, even when a week might be a little bit chaotic or I have a lot of things on my plate. I'm still making an effort to show up. I do notice personally, I feel different about the content week to week, and there are weeks that I feel better and weeks that I'm a little bit harder on myself, but I think that's really normal and part of it. Now, what I want to focus on next. So I'm not going to say what's not going well. I already kind of shared that the numbers aren't trending upwards, and that's a sign to me that people aren't necessarily coming back and they're not necessarily sharing. And when I look at my content and the podcast, there are a lot of thoughts that I have about what I would do differently if I had infinite time. Now, I don't have infinite time. So what I want to do is focus on the thing that I think has the most impact for my podcast. And that is really zeroing in on my preparation around creating valuable content. And when I say valuable, I mean it is content where every single episode, there's a clear objective of this is what you're going to get from this. And so when a person is done listening to it, I think Jay Clouse calls it the passing the regret test. They do not regret spending that time with me because they took something away. Whether that is a new concept, a new insight, maybe understanding themselves a bit better, or maybe feeling compelled to try something different because of what they learned in the episode. So that is what I want to take away. But I also want to think about the concept of shareable. Content worth sharing. And that is both for me wanting to share content, because if I'm being honest, if there are weeks where I wasn't as proud of the work, I don't really tell people about it as much. But if I had a really good week, I want to share it. So there's what's the content I want to share, and what's content that when someone listens to that podcast episode, they want to share it with someone else because it really landed with them, they got value, and they could pass it along to someone else and say, yeah, I really got value. Because there are so many other things you can focus on when it comes to podcasts, especially YouTube-based podcasts, where you can focus on titles, thumbnails, descriptions, how do you package the episode? All of that stuff helps, and I will start to look into that, but a good title, a good thumbnail, all of that stuff doesn't matter if it's not a valuable video, if it's not content worth sharing. And that's why I want to direct first my attention to the preparation. Given that I do this live, I want to make sure that the coherent ideas that I'm putting together and what I construct so that when I deliver it, people feel like it's valuable content. Then I can start to tweak. I can definitely spend more time. I mean, you can spend all the time in the world on titles and thumbnails, and I have constraints, which is helpful, but I know that I can get better at that. However, that to me comes later. I want to go with the highest leverage thing, which is to deliver high value content that people want to share and that I also want to share with other people. I think that I can also later on start to get and pay more attention towards promotions, sharing more about the podcast, but also getting the podcast in front of other people. That might look like guest spots, collaborations. And then I also might consider looking into what are some things I can change with the maybe format, what's included. Do I have conversations? Right now, it's just me offering insight, maybe suggestions, examples, and stories. There are other opportunities potentially that I could grow into. I do not at this time foresee myself wanting to be an interview style show for multiple reasons. One, for consistency, but there are still things I could experiment with. However, I think I want to get that solid foundation first. So that's what I'm really focusing on, because at the moment, the fact that I'm seeing the numbers get a little bit smaller is giving me a sign that people have heard something and maybe they didn't get quite what they were expecting out of it. And I want to match the expectations of the listener. I also want to hear from other people who have listened to the podcast, and that includes you right now. If you are hearing this, to share with me what has given you value, if anything, or what would be valuable. What would make you want to show up to press play and to hear what is being said on this week's episode or next week's episode of the Momentum Experiment podcast? Because I do really want to get feedback from people. I have heard from a few folks who said, oh, I finally got around to listening and I listened to a few episodes. I really like it. But I also want to hear more specific stuff of what really stood out for you. What do you want more of? Maybe what also do you want less of? But of course, be kind. There are multiple ways you can share that information with me, whether you want to comment, letting me know what you want to see more of, maybe what you want to see less of. I do also have a form for questions that is linked in every episode, and you could use that to ask questions, but you could also just share that as a way to give feedback about the podcast. And are there topics that you want me to explore, things that you've wondered about in your own life? Please share those with me as well. But this is where I am right now. 8 weeks into this experiment, and I really do feel committed to this over a long term. I know a lot of podcasts sort of flame out. Many people do not make it. I can't remember the stats off the top of my head, but it's very, very low how many podcasts stop after, I think it's in single digits. And so I've got a couple more weeks to make it into the double digits, but I am committed to the podcast, to making it better, and to make it something that is worth sharing so that people can understand that these topics, these concepts are applicable, and how can you use these in your own life so that you can find momentum and keep it.